Hello friends, welcome to the show Bottoms Up Research with Harshit Toshniwal. This video we are going to do a deep dive on hospital sector. We are also going to cover 10 of its largest listed names. It's a 7-part video, so for best understanding would request you all to have a look at all the 7. And one additional thing, if you find this video useful, then please like it, subscribe it and share it with more people. Let us start now. Hello friends, welcome to the third part of the hospitals industry primer. In the first 2 parts we covered upon the basics of the hospitals, what is the different type of disease profiles, hospitals की case mix कैसे होते हैं, and we also looked at की typical customer segments कौन है and what is the profitability profile of different customer segments. इस part में what we are going to discuss is about the economics of the hospital. Basically what are the key terminologies जब मैं उनके एक revenue model को देखता हूँ. Two, what we are also going to look at the typical doctor engagement model, that you can keep your doctors on payroll or you can have consultant or fee for service doctors. What are the advantages, disadvantages of both? And third, we are going to look at that what is your land ownership and rental strategy. You can own it, you can take it on rent, or you might not own any land or even lease it. You might maintain it just as a operator of that particular hospital. So जो भी models है वो सब we are going to study. Fourth, we are going to look at a hospital IRR. एक typical hospital of around 1000 bed over a 20-year period. Take very simple example. If I have a stomach pain, I go to the hospital and doctor ने कहा कि एक basic regular pain है. You buy some of the medicines from the pharmacies and that's it, normal pain है. So then what I'll do is that consultancy fee of that particular doctor, मैंने जो भी उनके diagnostic लैब में कुछ टेस्ट कराया होगा तो उस दिन, या फिर एनी सर्जरी और एनी फार्मेसी मेडिसिन विच आई टेक फ्रॉम द हॉस्पिटल फार्मेसी, ऑल ऑफ दैट गेट्स अकाउंटेड इन द आउट पेशेंट रेवेन्यू. बेसिकली अगर मैं हॉस्पिटल में एक नाइट भी स्टे नहीं करता हूँ, देन आई एम एन आउट पेशेंट एंड दैट is considered to be an outpatient revenue. Vis-a-vis, if I go and doctor suggests me to have an appendix operation, which is why I get admitted to the hospital, stay for there over 2 days, more than one night, then all the rental which gets charged, the surgery cost, whatever consumables which I use, any laboratory services which I use, everything gets accounted in the inpatient revenue, which is the IP part of it. So these are the 2 broad categories of customers for any hospital. अभी एक typical hospital के economics को समझने के लिए let's assume a 500 bed capacity. What is the bed capacity? Bed capacity is कि अगर मैं एक building खड़ा कर रहा हूँ, then वो building में maximum how many hospital beds can I accommodate? That's 500 as a number. The second part is the operating bed. उस 5000 बेड को मैं एक साथ चालू नहीं करूंगा. आई माइट जस्ट ऑपरेट और स्टार्ट विथ अराउंड 80-85% ऑफ द बेड्स, बिकॉज I want to build the capacity ki over 4, 5, 6 years, if the volumes grow, then I have some capacity to add without incurring any cost on the building or the medical equipments. But I might not want to incur the variable cost on all the 5000 beds. So this operating bed matrix is important because this is the one where I spend my variable cost upon. When I say variable cost, it means cost of the employees, cost of the nurses, etc. The third part is that in any hospital there are going to be inpatients and वो inpatient एक particular दिन के लिए रुकते हैं. So that day or basically the duration for which he stays is known as ALOS, average length of stay. So I assume that in this 5000 bed capacity 40 to 50 operating beds are there, and overall number of patients who have stayed for me with more than one night are around 2,80,000 and वो लोग average 3.5 दिन के लिए रुके हैं. So my total occupied bed days comes out to around 9,80,000. This versus what is my available bed days, which is the कितना bed operating था into 365 days. So that gives me my occupancy number, that 63% of my available beds were occupied in a particular year. So this is the fourth matrix of occupancy which is important. प्लीज नोट कि जब हम ऑक्यूपेंसी कैलकुलेट कर रहा है, आई एम ओनली कंसिडरिंग द आईपी वॉल्यूम्स, बट इन एनी पर्टिकुलर हॉस्पिटल अगेंस्ट द इनपेशेंट वॉल्यूम्स देयर विल ऑल्सो बी आउट पेशेंट वॉल्यूम्स हु माइट कम फॉर अ डे विजिट, डे सर्जरी, डे कंसल्टेंसी एक्सेट्रा. Broadly, for every one inpatient, typical outpatient is around 8 times. So for 2,80,000 inpatient, मैं assume करता हूँ कि 25 लाख 25 lakh OP volumes were there. My rate of charge to IP volume will obviously be higher because this includes cost of surgery plus obviously rental cost for the number of days you stay. Larger part of the revenue comes from surgery, and the second part is that but when someone is there for outpatient, typically surgery involved नहीं रहता है. What I charge for is the consultancy to that particular evening. So I assume a 4,000 rupees ticket size for OP and around 1 lakh ticket size for IP volume. Combined, my OP and IP revenue is around 3,800 crores. Now the fifth matrix, which is ARPOB, यहाँ पे it is nothing but average revenue per occupied bed. Now when I say revenue, I take both inpatient and outpatient revenue here, but when I take the denominator, I just take the overall inpatient beds. I take the beds which are occupied on an average for that particular year, and उसके calculation में मैं खाली IP volumes consider किया था. So basically ARPOB in formula terms is nothing but my IP plus OP revenue. Basically हर type के revenue is included, but on the cost what I include is only the occupied beds, which is nothing but my total operating bed capacity into occupancy percentage. Now ARPOB per annum निकल सकता है. एक 1.4 crore is my ARPOB in this particular example, but ARPOB can also be converted into a per day number. My average ARPOB per day was around 40,000 rupees. This is the concept of ARPOB. Now two things on which ARPOB depends. One is your payer mix. So ARPOB is higher for an international business and lowest for a government business. So as you increase your mix of international business, your ARPOBs are going to increase. So that payer mix which we discussed in the part 2, that becomes important. दूसरा important factor रहता है कि आपके revenue में what was the percentage of surgical revenue. We typically have a concept that hospital wants to keep us for higher number of days, but ऐसा नहीं है. अगर उस hospital का occupancy is very high, the number of footfalls in that occupancies are higher, then he might want actually to for you to be there for lesser number of days because they earn a lot through surgery and lesser through rentals. तो उसके लिए अगर वो 5 दिन में एक patient को treat करना versus in that 5 day if he can treat 2 patients, he will be more happy treating 2 patients rather than 1. So that is the broad concept of ARPOB and the revenue. Let us now understand the doctor engagement model. Clearly एक side में customers है, but hospital becomes more like a interaction ground between doctors and the patients, right? So कोई hospital अगर नया जगह खुलता है, so for initial few years he will have to invest in building that brand. He will have to invest to bring the footfalls. What he does is that उस region के सारे doctors को approach करता है. So for example, Fortis hospital, if he wants to open a new chain in Coimbatore, he is going to go and talk to the doctors in that particular region. These doctors have their own patients, and these patients have been built over a long period of time. Now what doctor will do is that if he gets to know about a particular hospital, about what are the new facilities, new medical equipments in that particular hospital, so that doctor would gradually start recommending some of his patients to that hospitals for doing surgery business. What doctor gains is that he shares a particular fee for the revenue which the hospital gets from that particular patient. Now that number can be 30% in initial years when a hospital has just set up, but over time that number settles at around 15 to 20% revenue share typically. Since we are on this topic, let us also cover a typical journey of doctor study, one of the most difficult courses in India. The first thing which they do is MBBS. It's a 5.5 year graduation program that they do after class 12. Obviously MBBS is the general one. If you want to do specifics in dentistry, then the study is BDS. For Ayurveda, BAMS, homeopathy के लिए BHMS है. Now that's a 5 year long course, but इसमें speciality नहीं रहता है. So it's not a very so you learn about all the different type of specialities. In the second one, which is your post graduation, here you become very focused to a particular speciality. And यहाँ 3 type की डिग्री आप ले सकते हो. MD is the doctor of medicine. So he is the one who will recommend us कि कौन सा दवाई लेना है. He will have to work on that part. MS is a doctor of surgery. So he is involved more in the surgical part of the overall operations. And typically MD and MS happens in a government hospital. If you want to pursue in a private large hospital your education course, then that is known as DNB. So we'll see that many hospitals on their call mentions that the number of DNBs they have, वो लोग DNB में क्या investment कर रहे हैं, because DNB is basically someone you are studying in a particular hospital. So even hospital gets your services at a much lower cost. But all the 3 MD, MS, DNB, ये सब degree के terms में they are parallel. All these 3 are equivalent in terms of the importance of degree. Now after your graduation of 3 years, you can also do a super specialty for another 3 years. The respective course name is DM, MCH and FNB. It is nothing but MD does DM, MS does MCH and DNB will have to do FNB. Here you study in a particular super specialty to gain that. Now after 8 years, 7 to 8 years of studies, typically 60-65% of the doctors enter into a job. It can be either in a government college or a private hospital, and 30-35% start on their own. The ones who start on their own would be typically from the medicine doctor ones, because you don't need a lot of fixed asset or capital investment to start it. But for a surgeon, he will need a lot of assistance to start a surgery on his own. So which is why they typically join a job. आप जब जॉब में ओवर टाइम स्पेंड करते हो, देन यू ट्राई टू गेन योर ओन पेशेंस, यू गेन दैट एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ सर्जरी. आपके खुद के पेशेंट्स बनते जाते हैं. वंस यू आर वेरी श्योर दैट यू आर नाउ अ नोन डॉक्टर इन दैट पर्टिकुलर रीजन, तो आप ट्राई करते हो कि आप अपने आप चालू करोगे. यू विल स्टार्ट ऑन योर ओन, एंड देन व्हाट यू विल बी हैविंग इज दैट रादर देन बीइंग एसोसिएटेड विद जस्ट वन हॉस्पिटल, you will be associated with more than 2-3 hospitals. आप एज अ डॉक्टर फोर्टिस, मेदांता, अपोलो तीनों से टाई अप रखते हो, and what you work is on a fee for service. So you get 20% of the revenue for whatever hospital you refer to that particular patient. Now if I compare the doctors within the listed hospitals, so again Apollo, Max, Fortis, they have the highest number of doctors impaneled, employed or fee for service. But a matrix which is important is doctor per bed. Now if you look at Medanta, HCG, Rainbow, ये लोग सब typically पेरोल पे डॉक्टर रखना प्रेफर करते हैं. सो फॉर एग्जांपल मेदांता स्पेसिफिकली हैज अ मच हायर नंबर ऑफ डॉक्टर्स ऑन पेरोल डिस्पाइट बीइंग अ मल्टी स्पेशलिटी. रेनबो इज अ चाइल्ड केयर specialist hospital. HCG is a cancer specialist hospital. Both of them prefer to keep the oncologists and the obstetrics and pediatrics on their payroll. So which is why they get full business of whatever the doctor generates, and their doctor requirement per bed is lower. Contrast it with Apollo, Max, Fortis, जो काफ़ी सारे डॉक्टर्स अपने फी फॉर सर्विस मॉडल पे रखते हैं. उनके लिए द डॉक्टर पर बेड रिक्वायरमेंट इज रिलेटिवली हायर नेचुरली, क्योंकि एक डॉक्टर अपना 100% बिजनेस ही विल नॉट गिव टू वन हॉस्पिटल, ही विल शेयर इट बिटवीन 2-3 हॉस्पिटल्स. सो दैट्स द फर्स्ट पार्ट. Second part is on the support staff. When I say support staff, I mean nurses, paramedicals and admin staff, right? And that number ranges between around 2.5 to 4 staff per bed. This is obviously excluding doctors. So you need around 2.5 to 4 people. This includes nurses, everything per bed. For Apollo that number is 7.4 and Fortis it's 5. But एक चीज़ ध्यान रखने का है कि Apollo के अंदर में their pharmacy business is included, जहाँ पे admin requirements is much higher. So which is why that number is distorted. Similarly in case of Fortis, their SRL diagnostic business might be included, so which is why the number looks higher. Now on the part of land ownership, so एक चीज important है कि a hospital needs to be in a place which is accessible. And when I say accessibility, then you need to be within the center of the city or place where people there is a larger population density of that particular region. As a reason, land is a very costly affair. More so because अगर आप आज कोई मुंबई में 1000 बेड हॉस्पिटल बनाना चाहते हो, so per bed typically it's a 1000 square feet per bed requirement for a large scale hospital, multi-speciality hospital. So for that, land becomes very costly. So you typically work on 3 types of arrangement. The first arrangement is that when you own the land and you operate on that particular owned land, so you only manage the business. It's a very normal business. Where will you do that? तो आप ये एक ऐसे जगह करना चाहोगे जहाँ पे footfalls are very high and you already have a land. So most of these hospitals like Med City in Gurgaon or KIMS in Hyderabad, they had the land on which they built it. Now these hospitals are one of the most famous hospitals in that particular region, which is why having a land gives them that advantages of high margin, क्योंकि आपको rental cost नहीं चुकाना पड़ता है. Rental cost is typically 3 to 4% of your revenue otherwise. So that is what you save in this business, but this is a capital intensive business. So in a greenfield capex, अगर आज कोई नया land लेके एक पूरा hospital बैठाना चाहे, then his cost per bed is going to be around 2 crore in a tier 1 city, which is a very costly one to justify the ROCEs. So जिनके पास land है, they might expand here in that particular land. So this is the first type of model. The second type of model is when you take the land on lease. These are long duration lease. आप 10-15 साल के लिए lease लेके रखते हो. Business is then very simple. You bear the rental cost on an annual basis. But ये Ind AS करके accounting policy आया था, उसके चक्कर में आप जो भी rent pay करते हो, that gets reflected in the depreciation and the finance cost under the Ind AS accounting. Obviously on the balance sheet side you have lease assets and lease liabilities, but for the point of my analysis, because then it's a very comparable and a true margin picture for any business. Leased land model is less capital intensive. आपको खाली medical equipment and maybe building में खर्चा करना पड़ता है, but it is lower margin because you have to spend 3 to 4% of your revenue on the rental part. All the incremental hospitals, they are generally coming up on the leased land model. Third one is the operation and management contracts. इस केस में आप ना land own करते हो, ना आप इक्विपमेंट्स ओन करते हो, एंड ना आप बिल्डिंग ओन करते हो. सो यू डोंट ओन एनीथिंग. इट्स अ प्योर असेट लाइट मॉडल. व्हाट यू डू इज दैट कोई एक ट्रस्ट या एनजीओ या जो भी थर्ड पार्टी रहता है, ही हैज हिज ओन बैलेंस शीट, P&L, वही हॉस्पिटल का फाइनेंशियली रिस्पॉन्सिबल है. ऑल ही डज इज दैट ही सेज यू टू मैनेज द हॉस्पिटल. And for managing that hospital, what you do is that you charge him a medical service fee, which is generally a fixed percentage of revenue. 10% of revenue, 15% of revenue, that is what you will charge as a fixed fees for managing the hospital, and that is your only contribution. This is a very good approach, asset light one, but again it's typically 40-50 year lease contracts, but at the end of the 40-50 years, how will you manage it? That is uncertain, but that's not very relevant now. So this is the model. Example, Nanavati Hospital in Mumbai, that is managed by Max Health under O&M contract. So having looked at the different revenue mod and the cost part of the hospital, अभी हम चलते हैं यूनिट इकोनॉमिक्स में. 1000 बेड हॉस्पिटल बनाने में आपको खर्चा लगता है अराउंड 1 crore पर बेड, सो 1000 crore, एंड दिस इज एक्स ऑफ लैंड. दिस इज मेनली योर बिल्डिंग कॉस्ट प्लस इक्विपमेंट कॉस्ट. लैंड आई एम अज्यूमिंग कि आप रेंट पे लेके रखोगे, एंड आई अकाउंट दैट फॉर इन योर कॉस्ट. नाउ आप अगर कोई बेड 1000 bed hospital चालू करते, you will not want to operate all the 100% of your beds in the very first day. You would want to operate 50, 60, 70% of your overall bed, and over time as the occupancy improves, आप धीरे धीरे अपने bed capacity को बढ़ाते जाओगे, operating bed capacity को बढ़ाते जाओगे. So that is the first point. Second, as we discussed that initial year your occupancy will be low. It takes time to build the trust, build the doctor engagement model. So your initial year occupancies would be more around 50 to 60%, 65%. But later on, as you set that particular brand, then your occupancies improve to 70-75% levels. So that's the second point. Third point is your ARPOB. initially the ARPOBs will be lower, much lower than the average ARPOB, क्योंकि जब आपके पास occupancy कम रहेगा you would want to do a lot of institutional business, जो government business या B2B business आता है, you would want to do that. But over time as your occupancy improves, you would also want to improve your payer mix, so you will do more of cash and insurance business here, right? And that gives you a higher ARPOB. Typically आज ARPOBs for a large hospital like say Medanta or Apollo hospital, that ranges at around 49-50,000. But my sense is that the ARPOB inflation is something which is going to be healthy for Indian hospitals. Why? Few reasons. One, already India is much cheaper than global peers in terms of their hospitalization cost. Two, as your international revenue mix increases, then it has a very big push to ARPOB. I think आज international revenue in the best of the best hospitals would be more around 10 to 15% at a hospital chain level. But अगर आप दिल्ली के कुछ hospitals देखोगे, that international revenue goes up to around 25-30%. Now in India, I believe that overall international business will grow faster than the other parts, so that is also a kicker to overall ARPOB. So which is why I take a 5% number as a inflation cost of the overall hospitalization, which is in line with the medical inflation cost, or rather slightly conservative to that extent. Now on the cost side, my overall gross margin in this business is 75%. Assume that for a longer period of time. My employee costs, which is basically the X of doctor, the nurse and support staff for the bed. We discussed कि typically 4 support staff चाहिए for every operating bed. So my initial year, and I'm assuming 3.5 lakh cost per staff to start with. Initial employee cost is around 20-22% of the revenue. It is going to be higher in the initial years, but it then settles to around 14-15% of revenue kind of a number. Doctor sharing fees, similarly initial years में आपको डॉक्टर के साथ ज़्यादा शेयर करना पड़ता है to build the footfalls, but once you have the footfall, then a steady state number is more like around 18-19%. This other cost includes rental, which is 2-4% of the overall revenue. It includes repairs, जो consistently आपको करते रहना पड़ेगा in most of your medical equipments. So all those in the initial years look high because there are a lot of fixed overheads, but over time that is roughly around 15-20% of the overall revenue. Net आप कोई भी hospital को देखोगे, it takes 2 to 3 years for you to break even in EBITDA terms, and it takes 4 to 5 years for you to reach around 20-25% level of margin. And for a mature hospital, the margins can go as high as around 25-30%, right? एंड अगर मैं एक हॉस्पिटल के कैश फ्लोज को देखता हूँ, मेरे इनिशियल ईयर 1000 करोड़ जो मेरा कैपेक्स लगा, उसके बाद आफ्टर 4-5 years आई विल हैव टू कीप डूइंग द replacement capex on my equipment. So be that PET CT scanners, Linacs for cancer, linear accelerator, ये सारे equipments are typically 10-15 year life. तो उसके बाद I'll have to replace them. Plus there are new technologies which keep on coming. So all of that together, मेरे को जो भी मेरा initial cost लगता है हॉस्पिटल खड़ा करने का, उसके बाद I'll have to typically invest 4-5-6-7% of that cost on an annual basis as my maintenance capex from maybe 5th-6th year onwards. So which is what I build. And everything said, मेरा IRR from a 20-year period of a hospital business comes at around 14% post-tax. Now this is a longer period IRR for a typical hospital unit, which explains it. Great. I think this covers and up the third part and brings us to the end of that. In the coming parts, what we are going to discuss is about the individual hospitals. We are going to divide it into 3-4 categories: NCR based chains, more diversified geographical presence, and the single specialty hospitals, and conclude with the stock preferences. But thanks a lot for being there. Stay tuned. Hi friends, so I come to an end to this part of my presentation, and like hospitals, I wish to cover more number of sectors over time. I've done a similar work on cement industry. The link to that is in the description below. Would love to hear your feedback and any other sector you want me to cover. But have a great day. Thank you.